Hello, Keller Williams agents back. Here's video number 2 of how to fill out the WB1, the residential listing contract. So where we left off was under line 52 and 53 under compensation to others. Let's talk about 54 through 57, buyer financial capability. And here it just says the firm and its agents are not responsible under Wisconsin statutes to qualify a buyer's financial capability. If the seller wishes to confirm a buyer's financial capability, seller may negotiate inclusion of that contingency for financing, proof of funds, qualification from a lender, sale of a buyer's property, or other confirmation in any offer to purchase or contract. So basically, what it's saying is if the seller's worried about that, in the negotiation when an offer comes in, that could be a part of the negotiation that the buyer provides some sort of proof of their financial capability to close. So that's all that talks about. Let's go on, and this is page 2. We're going to talk about dispute resolution. It says parties understand that if there's a dispute about this listing or breach of contract and the parties cannot resolve the dispute, the parties may consider judicial resolution in court or may use arbitration, right? So it talks about alternatives could be mediation or arbitration. It just says that's how we get to that. Again, 99.9% of the time, you're not going to run into this at all. I do make sure I cover line 63 through 66 with every seller, though, because this is kind of a crucial one. Not like unlike anything else here. We want to talk about fair housing, though. It says seller and the firm and its agents agree that they will not discriminate against any prospective buyer on account of race, color, sex, sexual orientation as defined in Wisconsin statutes, disability, religion, national origin, marital status, lawful source of income, age, ancestry, family status, status as a victim of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or stalking, or in any other unlawful manner. Now, for those of you who list property in Dane County and specifically in the city of Madison, there's actually even more protected classes from a fair housing perspective. So you just want to have that conversation with your seller so they understand that, in our eyes, anybody who can qualify financially to purchase a property is able to purchase a property. We don't discriminate based on anything other than financial capability. Then we're going to talk about disclosure to clients. This is the standard language around disclosure about what we owe as far as duties to our clients. I'm not going to go through that line by line. That's something that you can learn about in our broker classes. I would read through it though so I understand it. And then there's also duties owed to both sides of the transaction. I do want to talk about multiple representation and designated agency though. This is lines 95 through 111 because I do see that I think many of us don't understand it completely. So, this is referencing the next section where we're going to ask the seller to make a choice and how they will allow us to represent them. So it talks about a multiple representation relationship exists if a firm has an agency agreement with more than one client who is a party in the same transaction. If you and the firm's other client in the transaction consent, the firm may provide services through designated agency, which is one type of multiple representation relationship. Here's the thing to think about, and you're going to want to get clear about how to explain this. We are a large firm, Keller Williams, both Madison East and West, even though technically are two separate companies. I am the broker of record for both. So we would have multiple opportunities for a multiple representation relationship just because of that. What this means is that if I take this listing and one of our other agents has a buyer agency agreement with a buyer that they're representing, so they've got a contract with them, and they want to write an offer on any of our firm's listings because I'm the broker of record for the entire firm, both Madison East and West, we would have potential of a multiple representation issue or dual agency issue. We ideally, more times than not, unless your seller has a very compelling reason not to choose box number 1 here on lines 113, um, that it allows for us to designate another agent or have that other agent represent the seller. That's the first thing. So that's ideally that's what more times than not what you would want. Now it goes on to talk about designated agency means that different agents with the firm will negotiate on behalf of you and the other client or clients in the transaction, and the firm's duty to you as a client will remain the same. So just above here we talked about duties to a client, right? So that doesn't change. Each agent will provide information, opinions, and advice to the client for whom the agent is negotiating to assist the client in negotiations. Each client will be able to receive information, opinions, and advice that will assist the client, even if the information, opinions, or advice gives the client advantages in the negotiation over the firm's other clients. An agent will not reveal any of your confidential information to another party unless required to do so by law. So here's how it works. Designated agency, they agree to it. I've got the listing. My client is the seller. You, as an agent of Keller Williams, have a buyer that you have in a buyer agency relationship. That's a client agent relationship as well. If there's consent for designated agency, it lets you operate on behalf of your client, keeping everything that you would need to confidential on their behalf, negotiate on their behalf, and do what's best for them on their behalf. That's really why designated agency is more times than not the best choice for sellers and for buyers, because you'll have the same conversation in a buyer agency agreement. So, goes on to say on line 105, if designated agency relationship is not authorized by you or other clients in the transaction, you may still authorize or reject a different type of multiple representation relationship in which the firm may provide brokerage services to more than one client in a transaction, but neither the firm nor any of its agents may assist any client with information, opinions, and advice which may favor the interest of one client over the other. Under this neutral approach, the same agent may represent more than one client in a transaction. So that's option number two, is that one. So the same firm may represent me and the other party, but the firm must remain neutral regardless of one or more different agents being involved. And that's multiple representation without designated agency. Again, not the best choice, yet one that your client may want. And basically what that says is you become neutral. So you can't negotiate on their behalf. You cannot give them opinions or negotiation techniques or tactics. You really just become neutral and you fill out paperwork. Again, an option, yet one that I wouldn't recommend. And then finally, the last option is this one. It says the firm cannot represent both me and the other party in the same transaction, which then means that if we've got a potential dual agency, that's someone in the transaction, whether it's the buyer side or the listing side, has to go to a different firm. So again, just know that it's there. Now, it goes on to say if you do not consent to multiple representation, the firm will not be allowed to provide brokerage services to more than one client in the transaction. So again, that just means that we'd have to send one side or the other to a different company. So not a great option. So more times than not, 5% of the time, this is your best. Line 113 and 114, and explain that in the time that we would have that happening, that there wouldn't be information that's confidential shared with you as the listing agent from the buyer's agent and vice versa. Now, here's the one thing that could happen. Let's say you take a listing and you host an open house. And like most of the open houses in the current market, you get tremendous amount of activity. Someone comes through and says, I want to write an offer on the house and I want to write the offer with you. You can do that. What I would do though is I would work with that buyer as a buyer customer, not client, meaning I would never have them fill out a buyer agency agreement because what you just did then is you did create dual agency. So you would be very clear with your buyer and say, I'm happy to fill the form out. Please understand that I couldn't represent you as a client because my client is the seller, yet I'll use the state approved forms. And if you are more comfortable, we could put in a clause for attorney's review on the addendum KW. Mistake I see made, and there's nothing that requires this, is that you get that person who walks to the open house, they want to write an offer, you have them do a buyer agency agreement with you. In essence, you created an intentional dual agency. There's no need for that. Now, option two for that buyer, once you explain this, is they say, no, I want an agent to represent me. And so your second option would be to find another agent in the firm, have them be the designated agent for the buyer. They could fill out the buyer agency agreement with that buyer to represent them as a client. And as long as both your seller and the buyers have signed or chosen line 113 or its similar lines in the buyer agency agreement, that could work. I know it's confusing. It's the piece of the puzzle that's probably most confusing at the time of listing on anything else. Yet you owe it to yourself to get familiar with it. Now, there's a note here that says all clients who are parties to this agency agreement consent to the selection checked above. You may modify the selection by written notice to the firm at any time. Your firm is required to disclose to you in your agency agreement the commission or fees that may be owed by your firm, owed to you, owed to your firm, I should say. If you have any questions about the commission or fees that you may owe based upon the type of agency relationship you check with your firm, you should ask your firm before signing the agency agreement. Basically, that's not going to come into play at any point in time if they choose line 113, right? Designated agency, multiple representation of designated agency. So we're going to talk about sub-agency in a moment. Actually, I think we'll do that on the next video because then we'll finish the rest of this page out and move on to page number 4. Thanks for watching. Watch for video number 3.